talking like this. Can you hear me okay? All right, the front row said yes. That's a problem. Okay. Yeah, when Lisa goes, yeah, I can hear you, and everybody else is like, is that look I get from my dad, you know. When his, I might sound a little different. That's okay. I've been practicing my bass. Yep. No, it's me. Put your glasses on and your hearing aid and you'll know. No, I'm just kidding. All right, let's go to 2 Samuel. In chapter 4. You didn't know? Well, maybe the Bible falls open to that spot. Verse 1. This one, I just want to tell you, when I first read it, I said, oh, this is good, you know. Some neat things to pull out of it. Then the more I studied it, I saw how it ties in with some other scriptures that we're going to be looking at. So I think it kind of makes the history come alive when you see before, during, and after things, how they all connect. And this will be kind of fun. Verse 1 says, when Ishbosheth, son of Saul, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage and all Israel became alarmed. All right, so that right there is the review of last week's lesson. Abner died. How did Abner die? Who killed him? Joab. Why did Joab kill him? Yeah, because he had killed Joab's brother, I think it was. But in the middle of that fight, when that happened, Abner said, Joab, stop. I tried to get your brother to quit pursuing me. And why should we go into civil war over this? Joab says, you're right. And then Ishbosheth confronted Abner. Who was Abner?
Saul's commander.
There you go, Saul's commander. Ishbosheth had become king when Saul died. And so his commander Abner was starting to run everything. And Ishbosheth was kind of afraid of Abner, but because Abner was positioning himself politically, where he was going to have more power than Ishbosheth, Ishbosheth confronted Abner and said, how come you're sleeping with my dad's concubine? Now his dad's gone, but still it was not a relationship thing as much as it was a power. He felt the right to go to the king's concubine and take over. It's a power struggle. When Ishbosheth confronted Abner, Abner said, do you know who you're talking to? You're only king because I put you there. And if you're going to be this kind of lousy king and you're going to try to usurp your power over me, I'm going to hand you and the whole kingdom over to David. And Abner went and talked to David and said, I'll bring the whole nation of Israel to you. We'll have an undivided kingdom again, and everybody will be under you, and I'll be your right-hand man. And David said, yeah, let's do this. Sent him off in peace. Joab hears about it. Joab still has a grudge because in that little squabble that's kind of Joab's fault, he still feels like he needs to avenge his brother's death. So he calls Abner back for a private meeting, ambushes him, and kills him. So now we've got Abner, who was trying to bring Israel to David, dead, and Ishbosheth and all Israel is scared to death. Why is Ishbosheth scared? Let's be honest. Why do you think Ishbosheth is scared?
Well, one, he knows all along that was never his kingdom to begin with.
Right. He knows it's going to be David's kingdom. And what was keeping David from getting it? Abner. And why was Abner doing that? Because he liked the power. When he realized he could have more power by going over to David, Ishbosheth got afraid. Well, at this point, Ishbosheth is really afraid because the only one protecting him as king was Abner. And Abner was only doing it for selfish gain. Does that not show you how messed up Israel was at the time? And so you've got to understand going into this, when it says in verse 1 that when Abner had died, Ishbosheth lost courage and all Israel became alarmed. Ishbosheth was scared to death. What's going to happen to me now? And his fears are justified. He has a right to be afraid because now he's so weak and he knows it. It's going to be a fight for the throne, either with David or with some other people that might want to take it. But he's got no guts to win against anybody. And he can't just hand it over because he's the rightful heir legally to the throne. So anybody else that gets it is going to want him dead. So he's scared to death. All right. Because everyone knew that Ishbosheth was no leader, they had trusted Abner. When Abner was killed, I mean, if you go back to listen to last week's service on this, when Abner went to the Benjamin tribe, said, we need to follow David. They said, okay. And he said, I can bring all Israel to you. He meant it. He had the authority and leadership and influence, I guess is a better word for it, in all Israel because they trusted Abner more than they trusted Ishbosheth. Now that Abner's gone, everybody's scared to death because what is this palace going to be built on? Ishbosheth can't do it. All right, now verses 2 and 3. It's not just trivia. This is actually important. Now Saul's son, Ishbosheth, had two men who were leaders of raiding bands. One was named, I keep wanting to say Baanah, and the other Rechab. They were sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, from the tribe of Benjamin. Beeroth is considered part of Benjamin because the people of Beeroth fled Gittaim and have resided there as foreigners to this day. So, are they Jewish? They're of the tribe of Benjamin. But are they Jews? No. They're ethnically, they're not Jews. It even says that they joined in with the tribe of Benjamin, are considered part of the tribe of Benjamin, but as foreigners who've come to live among them. And I actually did a kind of a deep dive into this because I wanted to really understand. And wow, this is, every Jewish reader would have read verses 2 and 3 and known exactly what this is talking about. And it makes a big difference. Let's break it down. If we go back to Joshua, way back, Joshua. Remember when we went through Joshua? That was a few months ago, wasn't it? Joshua chapter 9. This is when Joshua is leading the army and they are defeating all the nations that are around them. And the Gibeonites said, man, they are looking up everybody around them. And we've even heard that their God told them to not withhold and make treaties with anybody around them to wipe out all the evil nations around Israel. And they were doing it. So the Gibeonites waited a few days, let their bread rot in the sun. They scuffed up their clothes, they made them dirty, and they went and did a ruse. Said, we've come from a land far, far away. And they didn't eat or drink anything for a few days before they went on this short trip so that they would look hungry and tired and the clothes worn and their bread moldy. And verse 7. The Israelites said to the Hivites, but perhaps you live near us. How can we make a treaty with you? "Oh, we are your servants," they said to Joshua. This is in Joshua 9, verse 8. But Joshua asked, "Well, who are you and where do you come from?" They answered, "Oh, your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God. For we have heard reports of him and all that he did in Egypt and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, and Sihon and Heshbon and Og, the king of Bashan." And he just like, "Oh, we heard about your God. We want to come and worship your God. We will make a treaty with you. We will worship your God if you protect us and don't kill us." And Joshua, instead of inquiring of the Lord, said, "Okay, yeah, we'll make a treaty with you." And they made a treaty. The next day, they find out, "Hey, you just made a treaty with the neighbors. We're supposed to kill them." And look at verse, where'd that be? At verse 15. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. So the Israelites set out on the third day, came to their cities. Now notice these cities: Gibeon, Kephirah. What's the next one? Beeroth. Does that sound familiar? That's the city we're talking about in 2 Samuel 4. We'll go back there in a minute. And Kiriath Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack them because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. So, you know what? It was made under false pretense, but we promised the Lord. If we make a covenant before the Lord, no matter what, we stick to it. And that's what Joshua did. He said, "You know what? We shouldn't have done it. I should have inquired of the Lord. I got myself into this mess. It's my fault, but we cannot attack them. We must protect them because we promised before the Lord we would." You make a covenant, what are you supposed to do? You fulfill it. And that's exactly what they did. Now, that is one of the cities in 2 Samuel 4. That's where these men come from. So, are they Jewish descendants? No, they're part of the ruse. Okay, but it's the descendants of the people who cheated Israel into a treaty. But do they have a treaty? They do. And so they are to be considered, even though they're as foreigners, we know they're foreigners, they're to be considered as part of the Benjamite tribe because that's where they're living. Which means, even though they're foreigners, they're to be treated as though they're bound to the Mosaic law. And that's kind of important in what's happening in this story. Now, to add to our understanding of the story, I want to go ahead just a little bit to 2 Samuel, back to 2 Samuel. Instead of chapter 4, I have read this recently, and as soon as I start reading it, you'll say, "Oh yeah, that story again." But look at chapter 21. 2 Samuel, chapter 21. Verse 1. This is later after David becomes king. During the reign of David, there was a famine for 3 successive years. That's a long time. A 3-year famine? That will do some damage. So David sought the face of the Lord. The Lord said, "Well, it is on account of Saul and his blood-stained house. It is because he put the Gibeonites to death." Well, here's what that story is talking about. Saul came in to the Gibeonites, who were the ones Joshua made the covenant with. And when Saul went in, he said, "I don't want them here." He tried to wipe them out. And God is holding David accountable for Saul's decision to break that covenant that Joshua made. First of all, what's that tell you about God's view of covenant? Oh, he takes it seriously. Now, he's not blaming David, but he's blaming the house of Israel for never dealing with it. And so, famine for 3 years, this is pretty serious. And David says, why are we having this famine? God, what did we do wrong? And he says, well, it's back on your predecessor. Before you became king, Saul attacked these men of Beeroth and the Gibeonites. And there's supposed to be a treaty. You made a covenant with me not to do that. All right, so you understand the story. All right, so now we go back to 2 Samuel 4. We have men, Gibeonites. These are Gibeonites from the city of Beeroth. And they were, it says that they had resided there as foreigners to this day. Since the time of Joshua, all the way until here, they're residing there as foreigners. And continued on after here, because in verse 20, or chapter 21, we see them still there. All right, you with me so far? That's where these men are coming from. All right, verse 4. Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in both feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, but as he hurried to leave, he fell and became disabled. His name was Mephibosheth. All right, what's interesting about that is it's kind of like a parenthetical story. We were talking about these two guys. You're talking about Mephibosheth being scared. Talk about the two commanders that he has in the raiding party. Abner's dead, and then all of a sudden, in fact, my Bible even shows it in parentheses, chapter 4. Why would we break to tell us this part of the story about Jonathan and Mephibosheth? Let me put it this way. It's because it's trying to keep our eyes on the throne and who could take it and who could be king and who's supposed to be king. Jonathan was the son of Saul. So if Ishbosheth dies, who would be next in line heir to the throne? Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth. Okay? And so it's trying to set us up for like understanding there's a conflict here of who's going to be the king. Ishbosheth is still the king, but now everybody's worried because everybody knows he can't defend himself and he's not going to stay king. So it's like, what's going to happen? Everybody's nervous. The nurse finds out about this. She grabs up this little 5-year-old and starts running. What happens when she starts running? She trips, she falls, she wounds him, he becomes a cripple. She's either really fast, so that dropping him could cause that kind of damage, or she fell and landed on him, or dropped him down a cliff. I mean, how did she, I don't know what she did, but she's running with this 5-year-old and trips and falls and drops him, and he's crippled the rest of his life. Now here's the funny thing about that. And I don't mean funny, ha-ha, but she was running in fear because Ishbosheth knew David's supposed to be king. Now that Abner's not there to defend him, what does Ishbosheth think David's going to do? Yeah, he's going to come and take over now. Is that the way David works? Nope. But that's the way they work. That's the way their mind thinks. The nurse says, oh no, he might be coming for Mephibosheth too. I got to go protect him, and off she runs. When you don't trust the Lord to handle situations, you will live in fear. When you fear, you will make decisions out of panic. Let that sink in for a moment. If you're living in faith, you're trusting the Lord, you're inquiring of the Lord, what do you want me to do? You make better decisions. But when you doubt God or you don't trust His way, you start living in fear and you panic and you make decisions out of panic. But I got to. I didn't want to, but I need to. And I hear those kinds of things all the time. Well, I know it's not the right thing, but, and you can see they felt so backed into a corner. They're making panic decisions. Panic decisions bring harm. And that's what I see here, because the reality is, would David have ever come after Mephibosheth?
No.
Nope. Not until God removes him. Until God puts David in place. Wasn't going to happen.
So at this point in the story, though, Mephibosheth is not 5 at this point in the story, because, say, whenever they found out about Saul and Jonathan, so how long ago it been since Saul and Jonathan?
That's a good question. Who was lame in both feet? Oh, he was 5 years old when he was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came to Jezreel. So he was 5 years old when Saul died.
Yeah.
Which is like days. I mean, we're not talking a long time from the time. Yeah, like this. Yeah, like it's all part of that. Maybe it's not. When Saul died, you're right. I was a few days ahead, but it's the same thing. But she was afraid because it could have been Jonathan's son or Ishbosheth, and Abner was already wanting Ishbosheth. But it's the same reason she picked him up and ran. Yeah, but good.
I was just curious too. Like,
Good call.
the timeline.
Mm-hmm. There are several things in here that talk about the timeline where it sounds like this is all happening pretty quickly. You know, there's 3 days, then this, and then 3 days. Now, from the time Joab and Abner had their little skirmish in chapter 2 until this, it sounds like it's still kind of raw, because it looked like Joab went off and did some raid and came back and was on his way home when he found out Abner had been there talking to David. So it seems to be pretty quick at this point. I could be wrong. But anyway, the nurse, the point remains that I think it was earlier with when Saul died, and they were worried about protecting him as Ishbosheth was being made king. But that fear is what happens if we start fearing and not trusting the Lord. We make panic decisions, and that brings pain. But the parenthetical verse there, verse 4, is to let us know that there's an issue coming about the throne. Because let me just throw this out. Because the whole chapter is going to the point that David is not fighting for the throne. He's waiting for God to give it to him. Okay? And that's the theme that's going to be coming up here. Watch how this happens now in verse 5. Back to the story of Rechab and Baanah. The sons of Rimmon the Beerothite set out for the house of Ishbosheth. So Ishbosheth was king. He had 2 guys that led raiding parties. These 2 guys decide to go pay Ishbosheth, their king, a visit. And they arrived there in the heat of the day while he was taking a noonday rest. They went into the inner part of the house as if to get some wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and his brother Baanah slipped away. They had gone into the house while he was laying on the bed in his bedroom. After they stabbed and killed him, by the way, that little phrase there, it's like saying they did it in broad daylight. You know, it's one thing to be sneaky and do something at night. And it's like, how bold to just do that in broad daylight, because this will come up again. It's like David's going to say, and you did it in his own bedroom. Like, it's just, there's that no privacy and protection at all, even in a man's dwelling. It showed they had some sense of privacy at that time. But after they stabbed and killed him, they cut off his head, taking it with them. They traveled all night by way of Arabah. They brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron and said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy, who tried to kill you. This day the Lord has avenged my lord the king and against Saul and his offspring." Now, are these guys Jews doing this? Nope. They are part of these Gibeonites that are living among the Benjamites. They're not Jews. And they said, hey, just like Abner, and they're probably close to Abner. They were all commanders that ran these raiding parties. And Abner probably kept them under, hey, you leave this guy alone. I've got him around my finger. And as soon as Abner was dead, these guys like, well, who's gonna, we got to buddy up to whoever's going to be king now. And they said, it's going to be David. We've heard the news. We know the line. We've heard the story. They knew that Abner had made that agreement. Let's buddy up to the new king. So they go kill Ishbosheth. Now, from a pagan's perspective, can you understand what they're thinking? I mean, I wouldn't do it, but can you understand what they're thinking? Yeah, that's the way it was done back then. Is if you take out the enemy and you're moving to allow somebody into position, then you know they owe you one.
No, they felt they were going to get like awarded.
Oh, big time.
His army.
Yeah.
They took that.
That's exactly. Yep. It's not hard to figure out what they were thinking. Well, let's look at it just a tad deeper, because that's why I think there's this parenthetical verse in there about Jonathan and Mephibosheth. We know why they would do what they did. Why would the devil want them to do what they did? What would the devil's scheme be? I mean, it's an evil action. It's murder. God was not wanting this done.
Maybe to taint David, so that way the people wouldn't trust him and think, well, you know, he's not being any different than Saul. He's taken out all of his enemies because if he had promoted them for doing this.
Yep. See, the devil's not afraid of you getting what God promised. He's afraid of God getting credit for it. In other words, if he can let you have what God promised, but he gets credit for it instead of God, he feels like he wins. Can you think of times in Scripture that the devil's done that or tried to do that? I'll make it easy. The Garden of Eden. He says, I know how to give you information God's trying to keep from you. What about with Jesus in the wilderness? Didn't he tempt Jesus, try to tempt Jesus, with the things that God had already promised him?
Yeah. Also, I don't remember his name, but Abraham and Sarah, because God had promised them that they would have a son. And then they were like, well,
And then they went another way to try to get it done. Exactly. Like, well, it's not working God's way. Let's try it with a concubine. You know, that doesn't work. You know, and so that's kind of what we see here. I think that the devil is trying to taint the purity of David's heart. Thank you. Not willing to take the throne. He's waiting for God to give him the throne.
And then the people doubt that God gave it to him and don't see that he got it by way of this way and that God.
Right. So David did nothing. He had nothing to do with this. But if he would have said, okay, yep, I know what you're doing. Here's a little reward. Go do your, or even if he'd have just said, I'm not happy with you. Put these guys in prison for a week and let them out. There would be the question, did David set that up? There would always be that question. And David, he knows this. And so in verse 9, David answers Rechab, his brother, and Baanah, the son of Rimmon the Beerothite. as surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble. When someone told me Saul is dead and thought he was bringing me good news, I seized him and I put him to death at Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed? Should I not now demand his blood from your hand and rid the earth of you? Well, I really want to unpack this a little bit. There's a lot to learn from these passages. First thing, when they told David they had done that, I don't want to skip this. It says, this day, this back at verse 8, this day the Lord has avenged my Lord the king against Saul. Who are they trying to give credit to? What did they do? They murdered, according to David, what kind of a man did they murder? An innocent man. But yet they're saying the Lord gets credit. The Lord avenged you through us. We're just tools of the Lord.
I was wondering if David was going to like this.
Yeah, and you know now he doesn't like it.
I didn't figure he would.
Yeah, you didn't figure just right.
Well, I think David saw through what they were trying to pull here. They were trying to appease him, saying the Lord was involved in this.
Yep.
And like David's going to say, oh, well, the Lord was involved. But he could see through what they had done.
It's what I call weaponized spirituality. And we see it all the time. I cannot tell you how many times people will be looking for an excuse to do something wrong, even directly against the scriptures. And they'll say, but I prayed about it.
God gave me a sign.
God gave me a sign. God told me. When somebody says, well, God told me, or I prayed and I have a peace, what are they really saying?
You can't refute it.
Yeah, unless you're God, you can't talk me out of this. That's really what's going on. And so we need to be careful. I think this is part of, not the entire thing, but part of the command not to take the name of the Lord in vain. I don't think it means just don't cuss. I think it means don't bring the name of the Lord into something he didn't do. And so David, look, when you are walking with God, you recognize that stuff quicker. When somebody else, I prayed, you're going, well, I don't know who you're praying to. I know who you think you're praying to, but whoever answered you would never have answered it that way because it's against Scripture. And so when they said, well, the Lord did this, David saw right through it.
And I think it's a good point you said vain, because it's like the men going, look at me.
Yeah. Look at me. I was the tool of God, you know.
I think God gave David the assignment too. He just said he
Yes, there's no question, both in this one and in the situation that he brought up in Ziklag. Remember, that was an Amalekite. Probably had been in the band of raiders that took Ziklag and all of David's family, because there's no other reason an Amalekite would have been on the field where Saul had been battling. And so when David and his army killed all the Amalekites except 400 young men that ran off. They ran off to fend for themselves and loot the plunder, and one of them ends up on the field and finds King Saul already dead, but he takes the crown and the bracelet and takes it to David and says, hey, I killed him. A little lie trying to, and David said, well, your words have condemned you. If you say you killed him, we take your word at it, and and we'll kill you for murder, you know. And why does David have so much discernment?
God gives it to him.
Yes, but why would God be giving it to him?
He has a heart after God.
Yes, if you have a heart after God, you're pursuing God, you're loving his principles, you're inquiring of the Lord is going to lead you. Why didn't the Lord lead Saul? He could have told Saul all these things. Well, Saul wasn't open.
Saul never, hardly ever inquired of the Lord.
Right. And so it's not that you just, well, you know, God gave David wisdom, but maybe not Saul or not me or not. No, there's a way to that wisdom that we all can have. If you ask God for wisdom, what does he promise? He'll give it to you liberally. You know, and so but he'll quit giving it to you if he gives it to you and you don't listen to it. And so that's the reason it is a routine, a habit of living with God that brings that wisdom. And so when things come up and somebody's trying to deceive you, you can see through it just like that because you have the wisdom of God. And that's what's happening to David. So David responds with wisdom. The first way I see the wisdom, and this shows, I don't want you to miss this in the story, it shows that David lives by principle. Situations will change, the principles do not. All right? So, two different situations that David mentions. One, Ziklag. A guy came to me and said he was responsible for Saul's death. Now you come to me and say you're responsible for his son's death, Ishbosheth's. Two different situations, same principle. What David says is, if you knew me, you'd know I'm consistent. Listen, when you're walking with God and you know his word, you have a more consistent lifestyle. That's what a witness and a testimony of your life is not just when you can tell somebody how to get saved, but it's the way you live. They see it over and over and over and over again. And so we see this consistency when David says, when someone else told me, like, I can compare these situations. I did this. So guess what I'm going to do now? Same thing. It's the same test that I think both, how do I say this? I think David was being tested multiple times to see if he would, in the flesh, go get the throne. Or try to take the throne. Or allow something to happen that would be anything but giving God full credit. And it's the same test coming up again and again and again. And look, the devil will tempt you on the same thing over and over and over again to try to catch you at a weak spot. In fact, if he can catch you at something where you've been strong and then you're weak and he gets you, it's even more devastating. He loves to do that to you. Consistency makes the difference. What was the principle or principles that David was living by? As we read through that part of the story up to verse 11, like I've already read, what are some of the principles you see David living by? I mentioned one is consistency, but what are some specifics? Truth. He's like, what truth? You're right, but that's like.
Truth that he's going to do what he said he's going to do.
He's
waiting for God to give him from that. He's not going to take it any other way, and that way people can believe him and know that he has God's ear.
But you're right. I want to go and just keep going, but deeper. So he doesn't want anybody to think he took the throne. He wants everybody to know God gave it to him. So what are some of the other principles? Because he mentions Ishbosheth was an innocent man.
That we don't kill innocent people.
And you don't kill innocent people. How was Ishbosheth innocent? Because the guy was Yeah, he was a child. He, he's an adult child. The guy was a wimp. Horrible king. So why would David call him innocent? What's he referring to? Was Ishbosheth completely innocent? No, none of us are. So when David says you killed an innocent man, he's referring to you killed him because he's the king and you're trying to remove the king.
Like he didn't do anything against you.
Right.
He just did it to gain favor with me.
Right. But I think more than that is he's trying to say, and the only one with the authority to remove somebody from that position is God. See, that's what he's been living by all this time. No, I can't touch the Saul the 2 times because he's the Lord's anointed. It's not up to me to remove Saul. It's up to God. And he even said, whether God does that by old age or in battle or a disease, it won't be at my hand. That principle has stuck, even when it went from Saul to Ishbosheth. He's like, you're trying to remove somebody from a position that you don't have that right.
And that's what I was thinking too. It's like, if God wanted that, he would have killed all of his sons. No question asked, but he did not.
And it's a good time to ask, why not? Wouldn't it have been the easier route to put David and king just to have them all wiped out in battle? Well, it could be teaching David patience, but David's been patiently waiting and passed the test on patience for about 20 years now.
I think he's throwing the nation of Israel into a little bit of chaos so they'll want David.
I think you're on the right track. I don't think it has anything to do with David. I think it has everything to do with the people not being ready for a good king. Think of Moses. I know how the story goes. First 40 years of his life, he's in the palace and then kills the 2 Egyptian soldiers that are beating the Hebrews. And so he flees to the wilderness for 40 years. At the end of 40 years, God comes to him in a burning bush and says it's time to go get them. So he's 80 years old and he's got to go back and get them, and he leaves them out for another 40 years. Now, I have heard it a million times that was his moment of sin, and so God had to send Moses to the wilderness for 40 years to prepare him to lead the people out of Egypt. Have you ever heard that? I don't buy it. Because when you read the story, there's no part in there that says, have you learned your lesson? In fact, when God talks to Moses and says, hey, I want you to go get my people, Moses says, yeah, but who do I tell them sent me? Because they're not following you. And God says, no, now they'll follow. No, they weren't following then. They're not going to follow now. Trust me, they're going to follow you. It was 40 years of setting Moses on the side until the people were ready. And I think what's happening here, David's ready. I think he'd have made a good king 20 years ago. He's already proven his principles. But the people of Israel had said, we want a king and we want him now. And God said, all right, I'm going to give him to you. You're not going to like it. And why is it taking a whole generation to get rid of Saul? Well, so that whole generation that picked for a king like Saul are going to have to live the rest of their lives with it. Does that make sense? And so that's why there's some delay here. We also see David holding them to the law of the Israelites. He condemns their actions as though they were from Israel. Had they been foreigners that had done that, it would have been an act of war. But even though they were Gentiles who are under the covenant, we must protect you because we made this covenant. And that's where Saul messed up. Part of that covenant is, but we will be under the law of the Jews. And so if a Jew would have gone in and killed Ishbosheth, that would have been murder. And so by David holding them to this, really it shows David's commitment in full to the covenant Joshua made. And it would be hard for us to pick that up without understanding the Jewish history, and that's why I did some study on it. But any Jew that read this would have known that, wow, through this whole story of Joshua and then 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st Samuel and into 2nd Samuel, you got the Gibeonites weaved throughout that, and following that covenant with the Gibeonites, it keeps popping up. Saul disregarded the covenant. David upheld the covenant. And I think that's just an important thing to pick up on. If David had handled this wrong and let them off the hook, this is how sneaky the devil is. If he'd have just said, hey, that's not what I asked, but let them go, that he would not have treated them as an Israelite and would have been guilty of the same thing Saul did in not following the covenant. It took great wisdom from David to see right through not only what these guys were doing, but deeper than what the devil was trying to do through them. He saw, ooh, these guys are in it for pride. But if I let this happen, I see all these other ways the devil could use it.
What do you think Saul would have done?
Saul? Oh,
He used David's spot.
he'd have killed them all.
He'd probably been happy they killed him.
Mm-hmm. He'd have rewarded them and said, come on in.
It was like a game of chess he was playing. He's seeing 10 moves ahead of
Well, what did he do when he heard that God had anointed David as king? Well, then we got to go kill him. Sent out raiding parties and assassins and pursued him himself with his whole army. That's who Saul was. But by doing what he did, it alleviated all doubt that David had anything to do with gaining his throne. Verse 12, and we'll end with that. So David gave an order to his men, and they killed them. They cut off their hands and feet and hung their bodies by the pool in Hebron. That means everybody sees it. What are these guys doing up? What'd they do? Well, they killed Ishbosheth. Well, who had him killed? David did. Oh, so, well, David must not have had anything to do with it. You see? But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in Abner's tomb at Hebron. So David, again, squeaks by, but by doing this, he alleviated all doubt that he had ever done anything to try to gain the throne. If anything, it almost looks like David's trying not to get the throne. It's like, no, just wait on it. Well, why? God hadn't put me there. Well, Saul was a hard roadblock, but Ishbosheth, he's an easy roadblock, especially with Abner out of the way. And in fact, we took care of that for you. Nope, not how I want it. And that kind of faith is why God chose David to be the next king. Any other comments, questions, observations on the story? I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I feel like there's a really good story here that I didn't have the energy to really make it come alive, but I hope you guys get something out of that tonight. Because I think I just see the thread. To me, when I see Joshua being threaded through 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel and, all the way through and the Gibeonites and how David is being so consistent, it just brings the story alive to me. Anything else?
I was curious, since we have a few minutes.
Yeah.
What was your thoughts on the David movie?
On the what?
The David movie?
Okay.
Because we went and saw it Saturday and so then
Curious.
All right. So here's the thing.
This is the perfect crowd to say that to.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, but we can cancel the. We're done with the live stream.